Welcome to the Hannah Judson Beat. This is a podcast that explores the creative mind, life, and work of amazing, inspiring women. I'm Hannah Judson, and today's guest is Austin-based singer-songwriter Grace Pettis. She is a powerful songwriter, has continued her tour planning and events, and is releasing a record called Working Woman, which was produced by an all-woman team, and I'm very interested in learning more about that. So let's dive in. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So where are you today?
I am coming at you from my little trailer studio right outside of Austin, Texas.
Okay. So how close are you to the city?
About 30 minutes outside. Yeah, something like that.
Oh,
So,
cool. So has that space become like sort of your sacred space this year?
yeah, it's funny. Before COVID, we actually owned a house in Austin and we had a bunch of roommates, and the roommates sort of paid the mortgage. So when everybody lost their jobs, we sold the house. And we ended up out kind of in the country in a tiny home. But I have my own little trailer right next to the tiny home, which is my studio. And it's really the first time I've had my own office in my own home. I used to have to go to studios to work and just end up in all kinds of interesting spaces or just work from the road or whatever. But it's been really nice having just like my own space. I've
Yeah.
never had that. So
That's like a life-changing thing, I think,
yeah, yeah.
So has that changed your writing or your output and process at all?
I don't know if it's changed like just the volume of the amount of things that I write or create, but it definitely has made it easier. Like I kind of have this sort of, it's almost like an impulse that I can't control is my songwriting. So like even when I was working kind of straight jobs, I was writing on the backs of receipts and things like that. Like I just kind of, I can't almost help myself. It's like a compulsion. But but having a space to do it that's quiet, where there's no dogs barking or roommates doing other things or getting annoyed with you for being up late at night playing guitar, is a liberating thing for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So so do you think you will never go back to your former lifestyle?
It would be very hard to go back. I had at my old house, the space that I had was a closet under the stairs. And it was tiny. It was like, my husband called it my Harry Potter office because it was just like just a little minute corner of the house. And, every time people walked up and down the stairs, dogs, whatever, like you'd have to stop what you were doing and like wait. And so it wasn't ideal for any kind of recording. And even writing, I think most of the writing I didn't do at home. I did like on co-writes or in my car or maybe in the shower, but like I didn't write a lot in my office in my home because it just didn't feel private in the way that I needed it to.
So what is it about creating? It's like it's not just that you need things to be quiet. You need to be in an environment that you create for yourself. Like,
Yeah, 100%. I do songwriting workshops and I always talk about needing two conditions for creativity. And for me, it's privacy and permission.
okay,
So, you need the sense that nobody's looking over your shoulder and judging you, even yourself. And if you can kind of create that, Jimmy Webb calls it a magic circle. You can include other people in the circle, like as co-writers and collaborators, but you have to have that privacy and that kind of sacred space to make a fool out of yourself and just try things. And that goes alongside the second condition, which is permission, which is hard. It seems like it's easy, but giving yourself permission to like spend 4 hours writing a song instead of doing laundry, or even as a musician answering emails, like taking that call, that can be like a hard thing, I think, especially for women. I think because we work so much at home and we do such a large percentage of the work that happens at home. So when you're home, you're thinking about dishes, you're thinking about laundry, you're thinking about feeding the animals, like
yeah.
you're maybe not thinking about carving out 4 hours to write a song. So it can be challenging.
So if you what with your students, if somebody has an issue or is having difficulty with both of those P's, how do you help them? What do you say to get there?
It's tough. I think it's different for different people. For me, sometimes I just need to get in my car and drive around, you know? Sometimes I just need to take a really long shower. Like, And I think for different people in different stages of their life, that might look different. Like, I think for a lot of women, it's the same way that you find any privacy or time to yourself. However you do that is probably also a good space for writing. Some people like to light candles, or like some people like to go, like I know a songwriter who likes to just go somewhere new. Like they'll go and book a hotel somewhere for like a week, which sounds expensive to me. But you know, if that's what it takes, like everybody, for some people it's picking up a weird instrument and trying something you've never tried before. Whatever kind of flips that switch on in your brain.
That is interesting about picking up a new instrument, that even if you're playing the same chords, it puts you in a different environment. Yeah. I was working on a song the other day, and I've been working on it. I've got a batch of songs that I've been working on throughout the whole lockdown. So the song is now over a year old, and it's one song that never was finished. And I've performed it and everything, but it's never actually been quite right. And I was listening to an Elliott Smith song the other day, and then I was like, those chords, there's something about those chords, and everything was just tuned down, just one, the whole, each string just tuned down one note. And that, I did that to my guitar, and I answered my question with that song. Like that was just that put me into a different, you know, and that was also permission to say what I was actually trying to say in the song, rather than just, but we're not here to that stuff. But those are things that I that always fascinate me, and also sort of struggle with as a songwriter. Like how do you get in the mode every time? Because sometimes your 4-hour block, you're not in the mind space anyway.
Absolutely. But I do think I think like the more that you do it, and maybe you probably have experienced this too, like the more that you exercise that muscle, the easier it is to flip the switch when you want to. So like when you're first starting out, maybe it takes a lot to kind of put your head there. But if you make it a habit, and you're consistent with it, and you're like, what's the word? Dedicated to it, I guess. Like if you just do it consistently in your life, your brain will kind of remember, and it'll be easier to like turn on that faucet every time. Like you can get there quicker because you're just, there's something about that too. So it's this weird mix of like stuff that you totally can't control, and then also discipline. That was the word I was looking for. Like there is discipline in it too, in just sitting down and like making the space. That becomes a habit that your brain gets used to, I think. Yeah. So you probably are very disciplined. Are you? Well, in the sense that like I do it regularly. Like I do it often. I'll try to write something every week, you know? I mean, I don't have like a set time per se. And I know a lot of writers like find it really useful to be like, okay, like my writing hours are like 9 to 12 or whatever. I don't really do that so much, but if I get an idea, I stop what I'm doing and I give it attention. You know, it's like a dog trying to play with you or something. Like, you know, if you ignore the dog enough, the dog will stop bringing the ball to you. So you just like, I think the discipline is in like giving it attention and saying yes when those ideas come, and like at least to enough to like write it down, because maybe you're in the grocery store, maybe you can't stop what you're doing, but you can at least like take a second, pull out your phone, like explore the idea as much as you can explore it like in that moment. So I think in that sense I'm disciplined about it for sure.
So did you grow up writing songs?
Yeah, and that's like kind of another weird thing about me is like I grew up around songwriters, so I've never not been a songwriter, never not been writing songs. Like even when I was a little kid, before I could write things down, I was making up songs about my kind of like musically narrating my life. Just I'd go around the house just singing about whatever I was doing. So it's just always been kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. Like I said, like a compulsion kind of really.
Did anybody record you when you were?
No, I wish they had. No, but both my parents can tell you that that's true. My mom did when I think when I was like 5, she notated out my first song that I have a record of. You know, she went to the piano and plunked it out and like wrote it on music paper for me. So,
That's
and
nice.
I do have that.
Very
But
cool.
yeah.
And so when you started writing songs seriously,
Mm.
at what age were you? Or did it?
I mean, I think I thought I was always serious. Like, I was always serious to myself. It
Yeah.
just wasn't serious to anybody else. Like, other people thought I was ridiculous, but you're always serious to yourself. Um, but I think they started getting, like, good enough that other people were like, oh, that's okay. You know, maybe around 17,
Yeah.
18, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're in Austin now. Were you always in Austin?
No, I'm from Alabama and Atlanta, Georgia, in
Okay.
equal measure. And
Okay.
yeah, I moved out to Texas like right out of high school. So, and then moved around a bunch and then came back,
Okay.
basically.
And
Yeah.
does Austin feel like home? Is that your?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I went here for a summer camp when I was like 16 or something. And the minute I got off the plane, I was just like, what is this? And how do I move here?
Wow.
So, yeah.
And do you have other homes also, or is Austin it?
Yeah, yeah, um, doing like the traveling troubadour thing, you end up in a lot of people's houses all over the country, and a lot of people's living rooms kind of become your living room away from living room.
Mhm.
So I definitely have a lot of those. I love being in Pensacola. That's one of my favorite places. I like getting to go home and get to go home to Atlanta or to Alabama. I have a lot of friends in Nashville.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there's places. My mom lives in Ireland, and I love being over there. I love being over there. I spent a year there when I was a kid, and it still feels like kind of a piece of me.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And so before the COVID-19 story, you were touring relentlessly or all the time or
yeah, really, as much as I could afford to be, I was
yeah.
touring. Like there were periods where nobody was really interested in what I was doing, and I couldn't make enough to just tour, so I had to get other jobs for like brief periods or whatever. And there was a brief Nashville stint of like a year when I was trying to be there enough to network and do those things. So at that time, I had like day jobs. Like I was a administrative assistant at Vanderbilt for like a year.
Uh,
Um, so yeah, there's like yeah, there were periods where I did other things, but it was always just to kind of support the music habit. And then as soon as I could book enough of a tour for myself, I would quit whatever job it was,
yeah.
go back on the road. Made for like a really spotty resume. Like I don't know why anybody hired me. This is probably like I'm probably living proof of white privilege because like if I was a manager at I don't know Pier 1 or Starbucks or wherever I was trying to work, like I would have taken one look at my resume and been like, nope. Like okay, you worked there for 3 months and then you quit and like, but I don't know.
Yeah.
They kept hiring me.
Resume. So.
Yeah.
And so then COVID happened and you had to sell your house and you moved and you've been touring or performing at all or online?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so we all kind of lost our jobs at the same time. My husband and I and like both of our roommates and then or it was kind of like in varying degrees like somebody's hours were like cut for a while or somebody was furloughed for a while or somebody like sort of went in waves, but eventually we all ended up jobless at some point. And then the only exception was that I had some a little bit of support from BMG, my music publisher, which was amazing. And honestly, that enabled me to not have to go work at HEB or go back to driving for Uber and Lyft, which is what I did before I got the publishing deal. So I really am grateful to BMG because they are definitely the reason like I didn't get COVID. Because I was able to be home and writing, and I have enough of a fan base that I have like a Patreon going and I have that kind of stuff going, but it wouldn't have been enough to live on.
Yeah.
If my husband hadn't been able to find another job, which he did. And then the second thing is, if BMG hadn't been there to kind of support me in that gap between him finding another job and and really for the whole year. So it was, I'm very, very fortunate. And I watched a lot of my friends have to leave town. Watched a lot of venues go out of business. So it's been rough on the music community, as you know.
Yeah. And so what does Austin feel like right now?
It feels like, we definitely been kicked hard, but we're not down. There feels like there's something in the air. It feels very hopeful. And I think we're all kind of hesitant to be hopeful, because every time we've been hopeful, we've just been kicked again. But, it really does feel like there's signs of life and things are starting to get back to, quote unquote normal, whatever that even means. But a lot of the city's vaccinated. A lot of the venues are doing it right, here. So there is a sense that I think maybe there's going to be this new, I don't know, it's kind of exciting. I think it's going to turn into another kind of a scene. There's going to be some kind of a rebirth here, I think.
And a shift. So when you say venues are doing it right, what does that look like?
They're enforcing masks and they're enforcing social distancing so that the musician doesn't have to be the one begging people to do that from the mic. And I think that's so important. And I really think the Austin venue community has been really cool about that. Even in Texas, we have we're 100% open or whatever, but in Austin, they're still enforcing those things. And that keeps the musician safe. That keeps the fans safe that the musician is inviting to the show. So it's just so important.
Yeah, I forgot about that Texas is 100% open. So that is, so you are free to come and go and do what you want to do. Legally,
yeah. Yeah. But in Austin, I think the culture here is neighborly, we care about each other. And it's a Texan culture. It's very Texan. It's also very Austin. We're a community. We care about each other. We take care of each other. So we kind of don't care what the governor says. We're gonna take care of each other anyway.
Wow, that's nice. That's a great portrait of a community. Mm-hmm. So you've already started planning your next tour, or is that correct? You've got things coming. So what's coming up?
Yeah, it's so weird to say I'm planning a tour again, because I really haven't done anything for a year. But here we are. It's I read all the same newspaper articles everybody else does, so it seems like we're at a third of the country has had at least one shot, and my genre of folk is kind of skews a little older, so I feel like most of my audience has had at least one shot by now, which means they'll probably have had two by May, which is when I'm touring again. But yeah, it still feels weird. It still feels weird to say. And of course, everything is kind of things could change, But I'm really excited. I'm getting to go back to a couple of my favorite listening rooms and places and support them again. And it's going to be
can you tell us some of the highlights of where you will be, where people...
Sure, yeah. I'm going to be at the Mucky Duck in Houston on May 7th, which is the day that my record comes out, and that's also a virtual show, so people can stream it if they can't go out live. Also, the day before, I'm going to be at Poor David's Pub in Dallas, which is a great room. There is an Austin show in the works. I don't know if it's announced yet, so I don't want to say, but it's going to be really, really, really cool. And also, we're doing a thing at Waterloo Records in Austin. I think we're still nailing down the date for that. So there's a few things like that in the works, and then I'm doing a little Florida run, going to Tallahassee. I'm hoping to book something in Pensacola because I love it there. A few little things. I'm going to be at the Red Clay Music Foundry in Atlanta, in Duluth, outside Atlanta, which is Eddie Owen's place, in June, and that's going to be a big release show, good time. So yeah.
So your first concert, is it a record release?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, the timing kind of worked out. Yeah. What did you say? Sorry.
Can you tell us about the record?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it's called Working Woman, which isn't subtle, but neither is the record. And it's a bunch of songs that I went to Nashville and recorded in July in the middle of everything. Mary Bragg produced it. And the band is basically her Nashville Rolodex. If we'd made it in Austin, it would have been mine, but we did it in Nashville, where at a studio where she was comfortable and with people she'd worked with a bunch. And so yeah, it's just like an all-star band, crew, like creative team, everybody on down from the producer, the special guests, amazing. The photographer is like a friend of mine, like the graphic designer, like, every single liner note is a woman with an X. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
And so was that the concept in the beginning, or did that just sort of dawn on you as you were working on the songs that that's how you're going to produce it?
No, we definitely had an agenda. Like it was intentional. I don't want to say it's a concept record, because it shouldn't be like a novel concept that women can make records. But it started in a bathroom at Folk Alliance conference, and Mary and I were talking, and I was like, Mary, like, I can't think of any records where all the liner notes are female. I can't think of one. Can you think of one?
Yeah.
And she couldn't think of one. And, I talked to my label, and they couldn't think of one. And, Rachel Sage, head of my record label, she couldn't think of one. My manager, Fabian, couldn't think of one. Like, so it just sort of felt like, well, if there isn't one, then maybe we should make one.
Yeah.
And with the lead single being Working Woman, which is a song about celebrating all the different kinds of work that women do, which is so often behind the scenes and underpaid and like not really seen or appreciated or valued appropriately. It just felt like the right time and the right vehicle, and just, why not? So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. I think that's a great. It's a great project. It's a great thing to point out. Also, like
yeah.
So, but you also want people to hear the music, and
right.
That happened, but also this great music also happened. So.
And I think that's the point. Is like, you listen to it, and unless someone had told you, like, everybody playing on this, the drummer, everybody is a woman with an X. Like, you wouldn't know that just by hearing it. There's nothing about, that's kind of the point, is it's like any other rock, country, folk, roots record that Nashville makes. I think it's just as good as any record out there. And yeah. So I guess that was what we were wanting to say it by just doing it.
Yeah.
That's the statement.
Yeah, very cool. So you said that your mother is in Ireland. Do you tour in Europe?
Yeah, in fact, I was in Europe like when COVID happened, and that was right. And again, like kind of perfect timing. Like the end of my tour, like my last show in England, and then days afterwards is when the flights were stopped from England. So I got on like one of the last flights home.
Wow. Yeah, that was such a moment of ambiguity, to say the least. Like those flights not going exactly.
Yeah, were you home when that happened, or where were you?
I'm in France. I was here in France.
Oh, wow.
But looking for flights in the opposite direction with family members that were in the US, and wasn't clear about borders. And then in Europe, borders were shutting down or not.
So you get it, because you're in a similar situation. Because my mom is across the Atlantic, and you have family on the other side.
Exactly. It's a little bit sprawled out. And so we are still doing pretty poorly with the vaccinations. And although it is happening, but slowly. And
it's kind of, I was talking to my mom about this, because it's kind of like, in some parts of Europe, I know they weren't great at negotiating deals, and maybe they're behind with their vaccination schedule. But like, on the other hand, a lot of those countries paid their businesses and their citizens to stay home for so long. So the cases are just so much lower. I mean, you've seen the numbers coming out of the US, like.
Yeah, exactly. And I also, exactly what your mother said, I also saw, firsthand how that works with socialist governments, where the corporations received money to pay wages. So people could go home and wages were paid, rather than receiving money just to sort of keep the business going. I mean, that was like a game changer. People could go home, and people weren't like out on the streets and stuff.
Yeah, I remember just like knowing that Ireland is roughly the size of Georgia. I
Yeah.
was kind of comparing Ireland and Georgia the whole time because
Yeah.
you know I'm from Georgia and that's where my mom lived before she moved to Ireland, and like just the case per capita was so outrageously different.
Yeah.
You know, and I had family members all year that I was terrified about losing, and my husband did lose two family members to
Wow.
COVID.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
but I never was worried about my mom because I knew that the government there, and she's an Irish citizen, and the government there took care of people for the most part, you know, like, so I wasn't worried she was going to get COVID because she could be home
Yeah. Exactly.
and still have everything she needed. She was still teaching, she was still doing all those things, and nobody was forcing her to go into a classroom or expose herself to that. So yeah, you know, I mean, it was a game changer. But on the other hand, this vaccination rollout here has been really impressive. So
Super impressive. I mean, there are so many things about America that need attention, and
yeah.
they're like, wow, that is so like sometimes just the ability to roll up your sleeves and get stuff done, open up the stadium, have people drive in, get the vaccinations. I mean, it has been impressive.
It has been impressive. I mean, there's definitely still like, you know, a lot of communities of color have been overlooked. Like there's gaps, and it's because it's like kind of state by state. It's really patchy, and in some places it's going great, in other places it's, you know. But overall, like just the number of people that have been vaccinated is like pretty great.
Yeah, that was a big turnaround in the U.S. story of this past year. It has been interesting how every region has its little story. Like,
Yeah.
oh, we're doing well, and we're doing well against our neighboring country, but
Right.
at some point, everybody has really suffered from this.
And I think it's that kind of mentality, you know, which we saw heading into 2020, that like America first was like the big thing that everybody was chanting, and it was like that kind of thinking doesn't work when you're talking about a global pandemic. It just doesn't, because viruses don't care about your borders. Like, you know,
Yeah.
they don't. They're not politically correct. Like they're, you know, they're gonna, yeah, they affect everybody. Everybody is affected by everybody. It's like peeing in the pool, you know, you can't keep it in one part of the pool.
Right.
So we actually do have to think about our neighbors, and we actually do have to have good relationships with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how easily you just said that truth. It is so true, and I think in America, but other places too, there are a couple different themes. Like you just described Austin as a community where people really look after each other. And I had an experience when I lived in Chicago where I lived in a neighborhood that functioned as a neighborhood.
Yeah.
With people knowing each other, borrowing tools, organizing neighborhood things, and that was a quality of life game changer. And I think that in many places in America it is like that, but suburbs have a way of sort of isolating people and
absolutely
creating problems. I do think that the future, if I could redesign the world, I would probably eliminate suburbs and maybe change cities a little bit, but people should be living together in clusters that work.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like I see the appeal of having like your own piece of land and your own kind of like deal. And part of me, like, I love being out here in the country. I love kind of how isolated we are and how we're kind of in our little pod and our little, you know, bunker basically. But, you know, on the other hand, like even people in the country back in the day used to get together and have barn dances.
Exactly.
They used to like get together and play music. They used to go to the pub and have a pint, you know, and
help each other.
And they used to borrow things from each other and have dances and go to church together. And like, we've really lost that. Like, we've lost that kind of community thing, I think. I think the TV and the internet and all this has a lot to do with it. It's been vital in 2020, but in general, I just think I've watched it happen in Ireland over the past 10 years. Like, just people more and more in their own little nuclear worlds instead of being so interconnected with, like, you know, extended family and neighbors and, you know. So yeah.
I think the fallout of that is going to be like in 20 years time or a couple generations. I wonder if there'll be a backswing, or if the pendulum will move in the other direction, because we'll have to see. But there are repercussions to the way we live, and certainly we're not designed to be isolated.
Yeah. I mean, we're communal creatures. I have really missed people as much as I sometimes really hate people. Yeah, I've missed I've missed just going to a bar and like having conversations with people. It's such a basic thing, but I feel like it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, yesterday, some friends of ours who live near here invited my husband and myself over to their house at 5 p.m. after work until quarter to 7 because we're on a quarantine. We have to be inside by 7. So
Yeah.
we went to the house, we were in their garden. And as we were driving over there, I was like, I don't feel like I've driven to see friends in so long. Like, it was so nice to have like a little visit. So
Yeah.
it meant it was like monumental, you know. I definitely am not going to take uh, things like that for granted in the future. The time that you get to spend with people is, potentially it's not a small thing. It's a big thing. It's part of our, you know, yeah,
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, it's like all the stuff that we thought was just the small things turned out to be the big things. So,
yeah, that's interesting. So moving forward, so you've got a record coming out,
mhm.
and do you already have your sights set on the project after that project?
Well, the project after this record release is another record release
Oh,
in July with my band Nobody's Girl with Betty Sue and
oh,
Rebecca Lopi.
oh, cool.
Yeah, because that record was supposed to come out a year ago and then, COVID. So
Yeah.
we pushed that one back by a year. So I actually have two record releases kind of on top of each other, and that's going to just take over my entire life between now and December. And then after that, I don't know. I'll probably make another record.
Yeah, right.
But
Exactly.
yeah, I have a podcast that I started in 2020 called Troubadours on Trek, where I like interview musician friends and we review episodes of Star Trek.
Oh,
Um,
excellent.
yeah, so I'm gonna keep doing that because it's fun and I want to.
Yeah.
I probably have like 10 listeners, but I don't care. It's fun.
So what is your podcast format?
It's just an interview style. I kind of like I have a friend, and we both watch whatever episode it is, and then I started off with like the first half is kind of about them, their life, and their music and their journey, and do they have any background with Star Trek? Like, is it new to them? Have they seen a lot of episodes? And then we talk. The second half is like reviewing the episode together, which is really fun because a lot of them are totally new to it. And then at the end, I have them recommend like a song pairing for the episode that we watched, plus one of their songs. And there's a Spotify playlist that's all of those songs, and it's a really weird, eclectic,
Yeah.
fun playlist.
So you're watching the original Star Trek.
Yeah, we're starting with the original series. I think I'm on like episode 9 is the one I'm editing right now. So yeah,
When you started, you're going through in order.
going in order. Yeah.
So how many episodes are there in the end?
Well, I should know the answer to that, but I think there's 3 seasons of the original series. Is that right? You got me on the spot now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to like relinquish my nerd card. But let's see. I'm just gonna Google it.
Because I feel like there's not that many.
There weren't that many. Yeah, so there's 3 seasons. Let's see how many episodes. And basically, that third season was not a given. The show was supposed to be canceled after 2 seasons,
Okay.
but there was a huge like fan campaign, letter writing campaign, and they renewed it for a third season. It's arguably the worst season, but we're glad we have it because it was a whole other season of the original series. And then it was resurrected in the 90s with Next Generation,
Yeah.
and then from Next Generation we got Voyager, we got Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
There was Enterprise in the 2000s, which like I personally didn't really care for, but
Yeah.
everybody to each their own. I love all Trek, but that's probably my least favorite Trek. But now there's been just like this resurgence, and we have Picard, the new series. We have Discovery, which is
Oh.
excellent. There's Lower Decks, is an animated like comedy series basically with like a lot of 90s kid Trek Easter eggs.
Oh,
Yeah, and there's a couple new series in the works as well on CBS. So it's been a fun time to be a Trekkie because it's like it's all coming back.
yeah. Well, that, yeah, I definitely, those stories, the characters, the whole thing about, the environment of space. It's
79 episodes. Sorry, I just Googled it.
79 episodes. So you've got a
For the original
podcast.
series.
So
What's
you know
that?
where you are in your podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm like an eighth of the way through, I guess. What were you saying? Sorry to interrupt.
I was going to say about your podcast. So you're going to work your way through the original Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, would you move on to Next Generation?
That's the plan. Yeah, the plan is to do all of them, but that's like a lifelong project, because think about how many many episodes that is.
Like a quilt making a
yeah. It's just kind of an endless project. But yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, that is very appealing, I think, to a lot of people. That has breadth, that has legs. I loved the Next Generation, and Next Generation is what hooked me into Star Trek. But I really didn't watch much after that. It sort of petered out for me, and then
you should give it a chance. It's I personally think Voyager and Deep Space Nine are both like really good shows.
Definitely. So I definitely saw some of those. But So, who's your favorite character?
Probably Spock. But I like Data too. Spock and Data, they're kind of similar characters. Picard is my favorite captain by a lot.
Of course.
But actually, now that I think about it, Worf might be my favorite character.
Oh.
I really love Worf. Yeah. It might be Worf. It's either Spock or Worf.
And what are the traits that they have that you are so at home with?
Well, the thing I love about Spock is he's like a character that has a foot in two worlds. And he's like a borderless person. And I think maybe this is like an analogy for a mixed race person, but it's more than that. Like he has just kind of this deeper understanding of humanity, because he's both like a part of it and also an outsider. Yeah. And he has like, I don't know, I love the logic thing. I think it's just like, it's a great bit, Yeah. But I think he works as such a good foil sometimes for human like experience. And so he just like, in a lot of ways, like he's the most human character on the show. Mm-hmm. Even though like the whole premise is that he's half human, half Vulcan, but I think that his perspective is really unique, and it just adds a lot of dimension to every story that he's in. Yeah. Because he has his own world inside of himself that's totally unique, and then also the vantage point that he looks at the rest of the world is gives you insight about it as well. So it's just a great character. He says so much like in his face without making any facial expressions. It's amazing. Yeah. And Worf I love just because he's a badass, like, I mean, he's a warrior. He's like, I don't know. I like that whole kind of, I guess I relate to Worf the most. He's very loyal, and he's kind of a protector, and he gets angry a lot, but he's at the core, he's not a mean person. Yeah. He's a person that's motivated by love, but he translates that by being ferocious, Mm-hmm. So I like his whole deal, and he's really into tradition and like, I'm Catholic, so I just relate to Worf.
Yeah. Okay. So do these characters come up in your songs at all, or traits of characters, or these complexities?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think like Trek, like at first blush, is about like technobabble and explosions and fight scenes with actors in dinosaur costumes, but that's not really what it is. It's really like a drama about the human experience and philosophy that happens within each individual episode. So just those concepts, like, like they'll explore things like, what is the nature of fear, or what does it mean to be male versus female, or, just those kind of like, what about war? What is it about humans that makes us want to go to war? What if war was all created by computers, would we still fight? Like, there's just questions like that I think are just like universal questions about the human experience. So it's definitely good for just turning your brain on, you know?
Yeah. Good. Now I'm thinking, I have to put that on my to-do list to start watching.
They're so good. Like, they're
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah. So in your songwriting, do you write about people you know, or do you invent narratives? Is it all like a sort of fiction, or what are you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I do both. Some songs are just like super literal, or they're, just character studies of like people that I actually know that are pretty true to their real story. I have a few songs like that. Others are kind of fictional characters that are they're sort of like combinations of real people.
Yeah.
That made one fictional person. But I think too, like, this goes back to this question again. Here's another philosophical question for you: is like, what does it mean for something to be true? Does it mean that it has to be literal, or that it actually happened, or can it be, true in the way that like a poem is true about? And there's, it can tell you more about the thing that you're talking about than an encyclopedia entry can sometimes. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
that is really interesting. That idea of truth, and that there is factual truth, and there are things that happened, and that stuff gets very blurry too. Depends on who's telling the story, but
exactly,
there's definitely another layer of truth. Or maybe there's a better word for it. But with an excellent poem or an excellent song, it's like things get cracked open.
I feel like the word is resonance.
Yeah, that it is definitely in some kind of vibrational state, but that things open up for the listener, and it is true, although it might not be historically true to them, but it's like it, and they can own it. Like it changes how you understand maybe yourself, or understand other people, or understand music or art or whatever. But it is another. I think maybe that's one of the key nuggets of one of the key outcomes of music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think it's kind of like, the concept of overtones. Like, you play a chord and then you hear this like magic ghost chord above it. It's kind of like it's, resonance, vibration, like, things being in tune with other things. What happens when people sing in harmony? There's like a magic thing that happens. So it's like, I think it's a little bit like that, or like the Catholic concept of sacrament, which is a thing that is bringing about the thing that it's symbolizing.
Yeah.
So it's not just symbolizing this thing, but it's like bringing it into the present moment.
Yeah.
Through some kind of connection with it. Yeah. So like when you play a minor chord, you're not just symbolizing sadness, like you're bringing about some kind of an experience for people. In a real way. Yeah.
That's a good way of saying it, that you're not just, the chord is not just symbolizing the idea, it's creating that environment, that vibrational state. So there are some people who have joined this live stream.
Cool.
If you have questions for Grace, feel free to write them in the chat. We're here, Grace is in Austin, Texas. We're here talking about her recent record, Working Woman, and 2 record releases coming up. And, I wish that I was able to show video, but I can't show video in this format. But it would be nice if I will share with you guys links to Grace's videos. Oh, I already have done that. So definitely check out her music. I'm just going to check my notes. I want to make sure that we've covered everything. So we definitely covered the Star Trek issue.
Yeah. I see we got a couple of questions. Somebody asked, when am I coming to DC? And hopefully soon, because I love it up there. I would love to get back to like Jam and Java. Love that place. So hopefully soon.
Oh, excellent. Oh, I was in the wrong place. There are questions in here. Hi, Andre. Hi, Mark. Hi, Alan. Nice to see all of you guys. So yeah, definitely. So you are going to go to DC?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna try. My agent Mary is kicking into gear now. It was such a weird, like, abrupt shift from there being like no gigs at all to like all of a sudden people are like, maybe we'll try it in June.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like, she's booking like a crazy person. So we'll see. Yeah, I would really like to get back.
So
Somebody asked me about what Trek character I want to be. I just do want to answer that really quick because I can't help myself. Data, definitely Data, because he's super powerful and very smart and possibly immortal. So anyway,
yeah.
okay.
So and didn't Data also just have like glitches of being human and
Well, he installed a chip in one episode that like allowed him to feel emotion, with kind of varying results. And but yeah, like he, again, like sort of like Spock, he kind of functions in the same way in the story as being like an outsider who ends up being more human,
yeah.
than the humans, because he's just like looking at their behavior and almost like a child or something. Like, he's just like a pure
Yeah.
kind of character. Yeah. So
Well, the interesting thing about Data though is that he is not human, correct?
yeah, he's an android, so he's a machine that was made to look as human-like as possible, to act as human-like as possible. But his brain is a lot more powerful, like, so he's a lot stronger than a person. His skin is like kind of glistening and kind of green, and like his eyes are this weird yellow color. So he's kind of, I think that's one of the brilliant things about Next Generation. It's like when you first meet Data, he's kind of unsettling, but
Yeah.
then the more you get to know him, the more you're like, oh, like, even though he's not human, he is so human. And I think it's a great lesson in kind of the other,
Mm-hmm.
but which Star Trek is all about.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like he wants to paint, he wants to like play the violin, and
He wants to do that as ways to understand humans.
and as ways, he's kind of like a Pinocchio character. Or like a Pygmalion character. Like he kind of wants to become, a real boy, I guess. But yeah, also just as a way to understand it. And I think that's like kind of his internal motivation and struggle, like throughout Next Generation, is like he sort of wants to be human, but he's also on a journey of like self acceptance and like understanding who he is. Like, who am I is the real question he's asking. So yeah, it's great. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Very good. So we've got two guests who one is in Holland and one is in Wales. Do you ever pass through Holland and Wales?
Yeah, I was in Holland, with Rachel Lavin, my musician friend, and we were on tour. We played, all over Holland, and then we had to go back and be in lockdown. She was in lockdown in England, and I was in lockdown in Texas. So, but it's been about a year. I was there in March, So
Yeah,
I would love to get back.
Well, I definitely hope you come back as soon as humanly possible, and I hope you pass through Paris also.
Oh my gosh, is that where you are, Paris?
Yeah, just outside of Paris. Probably as far as you are outside of Boston.
That sounds lovely. I would love to come.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to make that happen. That would be
great. Let me know when you're in Texas.
I know. I one day soon. So Andre asks, if you could record or perform with any musician, who would you choose?
I mean, there's a lot that like are no longer with us, but yeah, that's a tough one. Who would I choose? Gosh, I have a lot of heroes. I don't know. I think I'm God, that's hard. Maybe Joni Mitchell. Maybe Lauryn Hill.
Yeah.
Maybe Lauryn Hill. Like, and there's a bunch that are gone now, like Leonard Cohen,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Good answer. That's a good question and a difficult answer. Yeah.
I think the songwriter heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Oh, well, so I would have on my list for sure Leonard Cohen. But I would have to really give it some thought. It would be dependent.
It's a tough question, right?
It's a hard question. because especially if you think about like your heroes, like, you know, would they want to work with you?
And do you want to meet them? Because then they wouldn't be like anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we've talked about quite a bit of things. We've talked about where you're from. We talked about what you've been working on, your recent releases, your touring coming up. And we had this great conversation about Star Trek. So it's really interesting talking about the qualities of the characters who are all so interesting.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, if you were a superhero, what would your superpower be?
Well, my favorite Marvel character is Kitty Pryde, who walks through walls, and I think that would be a really good power to have. But it's also like a deceptively powerful power, because like it seems really like, oh, you can just walk through walls and like be invisible. Okay, big deal, big whoop. But think about that. Like you could, I mean, there is like one really disturbing Marvel comic where she like reaches inside a person's chest and like their heart, like she can do that, but she can, sort of change like the boundaries of things. I think that's like an interesting concept.
Yeah.
And also she can be a fly on the wall anytime. To be invisible, to be able to like have that kind of freedom to just go anywhere, I think would be cool. Yeah.
That's interesting. When you said that she could be a fly on the wall, I was thinking about how right now with our iPhones, there is always a fly on the wall.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think everybody knows that by like mentioning a certain thing and then the next day it's being advertised to you. So it's definitely a thing. It would be interesting to be a fly on the wall for sure. There are some, so where would you go? This is a hard question. Like, what would you like to have listened to? Where would you have liked to have been a fly on the wall?
I mean, I would go to like the basement of the Louvre, or I would go to like Area 51, or like,
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Or just wander around the White House, or like,
I was thinking that too.
And you couldn't be imprisoned. Like no one could put you in jail. So, yeah, but you would have to be respectful about it. Like I wouldn't go into people's bedrooms or anything like that. I mean, that's dumb. But I think like, yeah, I would go like into the places that you have to have like act like prestige to be backstage.
Yeah, exactly.
So
very good. Good answer. So thank you so much for spending time with us today, talking about all of your great projects. It was wonderful to see you here. Everybody who came to the live chat, please do check out Grace's work. I'm going to post in the live chat section her links again, just to make sure you got them.
Thank you.
And
this is so cool.
This was super fun. Where can everybody find your Star Trek podcast?
Oh, troubadoursontrek.com.
Okay.
And it's on all of the things, so you can find it anywhere that you normally find podcasts.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, well, thank you so much today for joining me today, and I hope to see you in Paris soon.
Yes! Oh my God, from your lips to God's ears. That sounds perfect. Let's do it. Right. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this was fun. You guys, thank you for joining us. See you later.
Bye.